Maybe you've had one of those mornings where you wake up, and before you even open your eyes, before anything has actually gone wrong, your chest is already tight. Your mind is already braced. Like some part of you got up before you did, and it's already on guard. We used to think trauma was a story, something that happened once, back in the past, and if we were strong enough, we could just close the book and walk away from it. Hey, welcome back to Slow Down with Brenda. If this is your first time here, this is a space where we don't try to fix you in 20 minutes or hype you up with things that sound good but don't actually stick. We just try, together, to understand ourselves a little more honestly than we did yesterday. And today, we're sitting with something that quietly rearranged the way I see almost everything about myself, including the days when I feel completely fine and the days when, out of nowhere, I feel like I'm dragging something I can't even name. So here's the shift, and I want to say it slowly because it took me a while to actually feel it, not just understand it in my head. Trauma isn't the event. Trauma is what our body does in response to the event. It's not the bear that showed up in the forest, it's the alarm that went off inside us the moment we saw it. And for a lot of us, that alarm never really finished ringing. We tend to measure whether something affected us by whether we remember it clearly. If we can't recall it in detail, we assume it must not have left much of a mark. But the body doesn't file things away the same way the mind does. The mind keeps stories. The body keeps a record. Quietly. Underneath everything else we do all day. There's one story that stayed with me longer than most. A little boy, 7 years old, was brought in to see a doctor because he had stopped growing. Not struggling to grow slowly, stopped. His body was still the size of a 4-year-old's. The doctor sat with his mother and gently started asking questions. When did the behavior problems start? When did he stop growing? And as they traced it back, it landed on the same moment. Something painful had happened to him right around the time his body had simply stalled. His mind may not have had the words for what happened, but his body made a decision anyway. It pulled its energy away from growing and pointed all of it towards staying safe instead. We don't usually think about pain that way, as something the body quietly reorganizes itself around, without asking permission, without explanation. But that's exactly what it does. And maybe that's part of why so many of us carry things we can't fully explain. A tendency to overreact to something small. A wave of dread before anything's actually gone wrong. A pattern of going quiet or snapping or apologizing right after for a feeling we didn't even choose to have. We're not broken. We're responding. Some part of us is still running old code, written a long time ago, in moments we might not even remember having lived through. If you've ever caught yourself wondering, why do I still react like this? Why does this still get to me? I want you to hear this clearly, because it's the whole reason we're having this conversation today. You're not overreacting to nothing. You're reacting right on time to something that never got the chance to finish. And once we understand that, everything about how we treat ourselves starts to shift. Not overnight, not in one video, but it starts. So let's stay here for a minute longer, because there's more to this story, and it might explain a lot more about you than you'd expect. That story about the little boy who stopped growing wasn't just one strange case. It turned out to be the beginning of something much bigger. The doctor who treated him kept noticing the same pattern in other kids too. The ones struggling the most weren't necessarily the ones with the most obvious problems on paper. They were the ones carrying the heaviest things quietly at home. Stress that nobody was naming out loud. Things happening behind closed doors that showed up later as asthma, as trouble focusing, as bodies that just weren't thriving the way they should. So she started asking a different question. Not what's wrong with this child, but what happened to this child, and how is their body still responding to it? That question eventually led to one of the largest studies of its kind. Researchers asked over 17,000 adults about difficult experiences from their childhood. Things like growing up around conflict at home, neglect, a household that never quite felt emotionally safe. And what they found wasn't a small, unlucky exception. It was almost universal. Most people carry at least one of these experiences, not a rare minority tucked away somewhere. Most of us. Which means, if you've ever quietly wondered why you react the way you do, why certain things land so much harder on you than they seem to land on other people, you're not the odd one out here. You're actually the pattern. And there's something almost relieving in that, once it settles in. This isn't a personal flaw you somehow ended up with. It's just what happens to a nervous system that had to learn, early, how to protect itself. Here's the part that surprised me the most, though. This wasn't just about mood or mental health or the things we usually associate with a hard childhood. These early experiences were tied to the body in very physical ways. How the immune system behaves, how prone someone is to certain illnesses later in life, how stress hormones sit and settle or don't over the years. We like to talk about the mind and the body like they're two separate departments. One handles feelings, the other handles biology, and they don't really talk to each other. But they were never separate. What happens to us early gets written into both. And here's the piece I actually found comforting, the first time I really sat with it. Researchers looked at what would happen if you removed the obvious stuff from the equation. The smoking, the drinking, the things people sometimes reach for when they're hurting and don't have the words for it. Even after removing all of that, it only explained about half of the increased health risk. The other half wasn't about behavior at all. It was about biology. A nervous system that had learned to stay switched on long after whatever caused it had already passed. Which means, for a lot of us, this was never really a willpower problem. It was never really about needing to try harder, think more positively, or simply decide to be different. It was about a system that had never actually been shown how to come back down. Maybe that reframes a few things for you, the way it did for me. That time you snapped at someone you love and immediately felt sick about it afterward. That morning you woke up already exhausted before the day had even asked anything of you yet. That habit of assuming the worst is coming, even on a good day, even when nothing's actually wrong. None of that was you being dramatic, or weak, or somehow broken in a way other people aren't. It was a body doing exactly what it learned to do, a long time ago, to keep you safe. We're going to sit with that for a second because there's a way to actually picture what's happening inside us when this response gets triggered. Something that made this whole idea click for me in a way that numbers and studies never quite did. And it starts with something as simple as a seesaw. Picture a seesaw, the kind you probably sat on as a kid on some playground without thinking twice about how it worked. On one side, you've got stress, hard things, moments that overwhelmed you even briefly. On the other side, there's something researchers call buffering. Safe relationships, a calm presence nearby, the kinds of things that help a nervous system settle back down after it's been switched on. On a normal seesaw, the middle point sits right in the center, balanced, predictable. But here's the part almost nobody tells us. That center point isn't fixed. It can move. And the younger we are when something hard happens, the more that center point shifts. Which means the same amount of stress ends up needing a lot more weight on the buffering side just to bring things back level again. That's the piece that changed how I understood my own reactions. Because something that happened when you were 4 or 7 or 12 can still be quietly steering how you respond at 35. Not because you're dwelling on it, not because you haven't tried hard enough to move past it, but because the seesaw was never properly balanced to begin with. Nobody added enough weight to the other side back when it mattered most. Maybe you've said this to yourself before. That was so long ago, why does this still bother me? And maybe the honest answer isn't that it still bothers you. It's that it was never actually finished. Your body is still, in some quiet way, waiting for the other side of that seesaw to catch up. That's not weakness. That's just physics, applied to a nervous system instead of a playground. We tend to think healing is about forgetting, getting far enough away from something that it stops mattering. But it's actually closer to the opposite. It's about going back, gently, and finally putting enough weight on the side that was missing it all along. So what does that weight actually look like in real life? Sometimes it's as simple as a person. One steady presence who, when things get hard, says, "You're safe. I'm right here." Sometimes it's a practice, a few minutes of quiet breathing, a walk that gives your mind somewhere to land. Sometimes, and this matters too, it's medication or therapy or some structured kind of support, because not every seesaw can be balanced by willpower and a good walk alone. None of these are small, even the ones that look small, because every time we offer ourselves or someone else a moment of real safety, we're literally adding weight to the side of the seesaw that was left empty for too long. Here's something else worth sitting with. This isn't only about what happened to you. It's also about who was around when it happened. Two people can go through something equally hard and come out of it very differently, depending on whether there was someone there to help them process it in real time. Not someone who fixed it, just someone who stayed close enough that the nervous system didn't have to handle it entirely alone. That's the difference between an event turning into a passing hard moment and an event turning into something the body carries for decades. And if you're sitting here realizing that you didn't have much of that growing up, that there wasn't really anyone adding weight to your side of the seesaw, I want to be honest with you about something. That gap doesn't stay a gap forever, not unless we decide it does. Because the seesaw isn't only balanced by what happened to us when we were small, it can still be balanced now by what we choose to build for ourselves as adults. Slowly, on purpose, one small addition at a time. That might sound like a lot to take in. So let's stay with it a little longer, because there's a piece of research that made this feel less like theory and a lot more like something real and almost hopeful. There's a piece of research that stuck with me more than almost anything else in this whole conversation. It involves, of all things, baby rats. Stay with me here because it goes somewhere good. Researchers looked at what happened to rat pups depending on how much comfort they received from their mothers after something stressful. Some mothers did a lot of it, licking, grooming, staying close. Others did far less. Later, when those baby rats grew into adults, the difference showed up clearly. The ones who'd received more comfort recovered faster from stress. Their systems calmed back down more easily once whatever had upset them was over. But then the researchers did something that changes the whole story. They switched some of the babies at birth. A pup born to a low-comfort mother was raised by a high-comfort one, and a pup born to a high-comfort mother was raised by one who gave far less. And it wasn't biology that won, it was care. The rats grew up carrying the stress patterns of whoever actually raised them, not whoever gave birth to them. Even the markers on their DNA, not the code itself, but how it got read and expressed, shifted based on the care they received growing up. Which tells us something enormous if we let it land all the way. Whatever pattern got written into us early isn't permanent. It's not some fixed sentence we're stuck serving out for the rest of our lives. It can be rewritten. Not instantly, not through force or sheer determination, but through something researchers call a corrective experience. Here's what that actually means underneath the clinical name. Whatever you learned back then, your body gets to learn something different now. Maybe you learned, somewhere along the way, that asking for help doesn't really get you help. That people either don't show up or they show up annoyed that you needed them. So the corrective experience is asking anyway, and this time, having someone actually stay. Maybe you learned that big feelings weren't safe to have around other people, that crying or shaking or falling apart even a little would push someone away. So the corrective experience is having that feeling right there in front of someone who doesn't flinch and doesn't leave. There's a phrase for this that I keep coming back to over and over. I'm here. Picture it like this. The version of you that went through something hard, sitting there, however old they were at the time. Small, maybe. Scared, maybe. And a steadier, older version of you walks in, sits down right next to them, and simply says, I'm here. That's it. That's the whole intervention in its simplest, most honest form. Not a fix, not a 5-step plan, not even advice, just presence. And here's the part that I think we skip past too quickly. We get to be that presence for ourselves now, even if nobody offered it to us back then. Especially if nobody offered it to us back then. This doesn't erase what happened. It's not about pretending the hard thing didn't happen or rushing past it to get to some tidy, healed version of ourselves. It's slower than that. It's smaller than that in the best way. It's just one honest moment at a time, where instead of judging the reaction or trying to push past it, we get curious about it instead. Oh, there's that old alarm again. And then gently underneath it. I'm here now. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. That shift, small as it sounds, is where the actual rewiring happens. Not in one big breakthrough moment, but in the quiet repetition of showing up for ourselves again and again until our body starts to believe it. So the real question becomes, what does that actually look like on an ordinary Tuesday? Not in theory, in practice. That's exactly where we're headed next. So let's bring this all the way down to an ordinary day. Because understanding all of this is one thing, actually living it is another. And the good news is, it doesn't start big. It's not supposed to. It starts with something as small as a short walk. A few quiet minutes before the day gets loud and starts asking things of you. Writing down what you're actually feeling instead of swallowing it and moving on like nothing happened. These aren't dramatic interventions. They might even feel a little too small to matter. But that's exactly the point. Each one is just a quiet signal to your nervous system. We're safe now. We can stand down. Maybe you start your morning that way instead of reaching straight for your phone. Not because it fixes everything. It won't. But because it tells your body, before the world gets a chance to, that you're the one setting the tone today. There's a second piece to this, and honestly, it might matter even more than the first. Having at least one person you can be fully honest with. Not everyone, just one. Someone you don't have to perform for. Someone who, when you say, I think I overreacted and I don't fully know why, doesn't flinch, doesn't judge, just stays with you in it. That one relationship can do more for a nervous system than almost anything else on this list. And if that feels like more than a friend can hold right now, that's okay too. Sometimes what we're carrying needs more than conversation. It needs real, structured support. A therapist. Sometimes medication. And needing that isn't a sign that something is more wrong with you than everyone else. It's just a sign that your seesaw needs a bigger buffer than one person can offer alone. That's not failure. That's just accurate information about what you need. There's a phrase I keep returning to, long after this research first found me. Infrastructure is love in action. The walk you take before checking your messages. The friend you call before you spiral instead of after. The pause you give yourself before reacting to something that stung. None of that is small, even though it looks small from the outside. It's the quiet architecture that keeps a person steady, long before anything ever falls apart. We don't have to wait for the hard moment to start building it. We get to start now, on an ordinary day, for no dramatic reason at all. So maybe tonight or tomorrow morning, here's the one small thing. Notice, without judging yourself for it, one moment where you reacted a little harder than the situation actually called for. Don't spiral into why or replay it for the next hour. Just notice it, gently. Oh, there's my old alarm again. And then, quietly, say the rest of it to yourself. I'm here now. That's not a small thing, even though it sounds like one. It's the exact thing every piece of research we've talked about today points back to. Presence. Ours, for ourselves, finally showing up on time. We didn't come here today to fix your whole life in one sitting. That was never the goal. We just wanted you to understand yourself a little better than you did 20 minutes ago. And maybe, if that happened even a little, that's enough. Because you were never broken. You were responding. And starting today, you get to respond a little differently. Thanks for slowing down with me today. If this found you at the right moment, or maybe found someone else you know who needs to hear it, I hope you'll pass it along. And I'll see you next time right here when you're ready to keep going.